Somewhere in the room where you are lying right now, the light has probably dimmed. Maybe your eyes are already heavy. Maybe you are simply resting, listening, letting the day settle. And in a few minutes, whether you notice it happening or not, something extraordinary is going to begin. Not a story, not a performance, nothing loud or dramatic, just your brain quietly getting to work on one of the strangest and most important jobs it has. Because tonight, while your body lies still and your eyes close, your brain will not be resting the way you might imagine rest to look. It will be cleaning itself. It will be sorting through everything that happened to you today, deciding what to keep and what to let go. It will be running emotional repair work you are not aware of. It will be regulating your heartbeat, your breathing, your temperature, your hormones, all without asking your permission, all without you lifting a finger. And somewhere in the later hours of the night, it may even start telling you stories, vivid, strange, occasionally beautiful stories, most of which you will never remember having heard. We tend to think of sleep as an absence of activity, an absence of thought, an absence of awareness. But that is not quite right. Sleep is not the brain turning off. It is the brain changing what kind of work it does. During the day, your brain is mostly occupied with the outside world, with sound and light and decisions and other people and the countless small demands of being awake. At night, that outward attention is dimmed and something else opens up. The brain turns inward. It starts tending to itself, the way a busy household might wait until the guests have gone home before finally cleaning the kitchen, repairing what is broken, and putting things back in their place. Tonight, we are going to follow that process from the very beginning to the very end. From the moment your mind first starts to loosen its grip on the day, through the layers of light sleep, into the profound stillness of deep sleep, and onward into the vivid, dreaming corridors of REM sleep, before finally arriving, gently, at morning. Along the way, we will look at real, documented science, the kind that has come from decades of careful research in sleep laboratories around the world, watching brain waves, measuring hormones, tracking heart rates through the night. There is no need to remember any of it. There is no test at the end. You can simply let it wash over you, the way you might listen to rain on a window, present but not urgent, interesting but never demanding. If your mind still feels busy right now, if thoughts are still moving through it in loose, unfinished sentences, that is completely normal. That busyness is not a sign that something is wrong with you or that sleep is far away. It is often the opening scene of the very process we are about to describe. So let your eyes rest, let your breathing slow if it wants to, and let's begin at the edge of sleep, in that strange, soft borderland where wakefulness starts to dissolve. Falling asleep feels, from the inside, like a single event. One moment you are aware, and the next, seemingly, you are not. But that is an illusion created by memory, because you are not there to observe the exact instant when awareness slips away. In reality, falling asleep is not a light switch. It is a gradual dimming, a slow crossing of a border that scientists call sleep onset, and it happens in a way that is far stranger and far more interesting than a simple fade to black. As you begin to drift, the brain waves recorded on an electroencephalogram start to change their shape. During calm wakefulness, with your eyes closed, your brain typically produces what are called alpha waves, gentle, rhythmic patterns associated with quiet relaxation. As sleep approaches, those alpha waves begin to decrease, and slower waves, called theta waves, start to appear in their place. This shift marks the entry into what sleep researchers label the first stage of sleep, often written simply as N1. It is the lightest stage of sleep there is, so light that many people who are woken during it insist they were never asleep at all. This transitional zone between wakefulness and true sleep has its own name in the scientific literature: hypnagogia. It comes from Greek words meaning something close to leading into sleep, and it describes a state that is neither fully awake nor fully asleep, but something briefly in between. During hypnagogia, the mind often produces fragments of imagery, brief flashes of light, half-formed shapes, snippets of sound, or short bursts of sensation that arrive uninvited and vanish just as quickly. You may have experienced this yourself, that odd sense of seeing a shape behind your closed eyelids, or hearing your name spoken softly when no one has said anything at all, or feeling as though you are suddenly falling, only to jerk slightly and find yourself still lying safely in bed. That falling sensation has a name too. It is called a hypnagogic jerk, a sudden, involuntary muscle contraction that can occur as the body settles into sleep. It is entirely normal, experienced by most people at some point, and is not a sign that anything has gone wrong. One leading idea, though still not completely settled among researchers, is that as your muscles relax and your brain shifts its internal sense of your body's position, it can briefly misinterpret that relaxation as a kind of falling, prompting a quick protective muscle response before you slip further into rest. The reason those flashes of imagery and sound occur at all seems to be tied to how the brain reorganizes itself as wakefulness fades. During ordinary waking life, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most associated with logical thought, planning, and impulse control, keeps a tight rein on the flow of thoughts and associations. But as you drift into hypnagogia, the prefrontal cortex begins to loosen its hold. Different regions of the brain start to fall asleep at slightly different rates, creating a kind of patchwork state of consciousness. Some areas still partly alert, others already drifting. Visual and auditory processing centers, in particular, may remain briefly active, even as the logical, organizing parts of the brain begin to power down, and this mismatch is thought to be part of why hypnagogic experiences can feel so vivid and yet so illogical at the same time. Something else happens in this state that researchers have found genuinely fascinating. Because the tight, orderly control of the waking prefrontal cortex is relaxing, thoughts are freer to wander into unusual combinations. Distant memories, ideas, and images that would never normally sit next to each other in the waking mind can suddenly appear side by side. This is one of the reasons hypnagogia has such a long association with creativity. There are accounts, often told and retold, of inventors and artists deliberately trying to catch this fragile state in order to harvest the strange associations it produces, and some laboratory studies have supported the idea that this specific window, right at the edge of sleep, may represent something like a unique creative state, a brief opportunity where the mind's normal boundaries loosen just enough to let something new slip through before true sleep closes the door. If you have ever spent a long afternoon playing a repetitive video game, skiing down slope after slope, or scrolling through image after image on a screen, and then noticed those same shapes or patterns reappearing behind your closed eyes as you tried to fall asleep that night, you experienced something researchers call the Tetris effect, named after the falling block puzzle game in which this phenomenon was first studied closely. It happens because the visual and motor processing systems you used so intensively during the day remain primed even as you drift towards sleep, replaying and recombining the patterns you spent so many hours absorbing. It is not a malfunction. It is simply the echo of a very active mind winding down. None of this lasts very long. Hypnagogia is typically brief, sometimes lasting only a minute or two, before the brain settles into a more stable pattern of light sleep. But brief as it is, this stage marks the true beginning of the night's hidden work. It is the doorway, not the destination. And on the other side of that doorway, the brain is about to do something remarkable. It will start protecting your sleep, filtering the world outside, and deciding, moment by moment, what is worth waking up for. It is worth returning, briefly, to something touched on earlier. Why thoughts so often turn strange, loose, and slightly illogical in the minutes before sleep even fully arrives, well before any formal dream has begun. Researchers who study this earliest window of sleep onset describe a kind of thinking sometimes called sleep onset mentation, thought that is often fragmented, oddly associative, and only loosely tied to anything resembling a coherent storyline, closer to a string of half-formed scenes than an organized train of thought. Part of the explanation lies in something already discussed, the gradual loosening of control by the prefrontal cortex as wakefulness fades. But there is a complementary piece of the picture worth adding here. As the brain approaches sleep, activity within the default mode network, the same set of interconnected regions responsible for ordinary daydreaming and inward reflection during wakefulness, tends to become more prominent relative to the networks responsible for focused, externally directed attention. In effect, the part of your mind responsible for wandering, associating, and drifting between loosely connected ideas is left with comparatively less competition from the parts of your brain that would normally organize and constrain it. Thoughts are freer to jump from one association to another, a half-remembered conversation blurring into a fragment of a song, a passing worry dissolving into an unrelated image, without the usual editorial oversight that waking logic would ordinarily supply. This is one of the reasons falling asleep can feel, from the inside, less like a single clean thought trailing off, and more like overhearing several unrelated thoughts overlapping, none of them quite finishing before another begins. It is not a sign of a mind unraveling. It is closer to the opposite, a sign that the tightly managed, single-threaded focus of waking attention is being deliberately relaxed, making room for the kind of loose, associative processing that, as explored earlier in this journey, may also be quietly laying the groundwork for the sleep onset creative insights some research has found in this very same window. If your own thoughts have felt like this recently, drifting, unfinished, jumping without warning from one small subject to another, there is nothing concerning in that. It is simply what a mind sounds like as it lets go of the tight, organized structure of the day, on its way towards something looser, quieter, and, before long, fully asleep. As hypnagogia gives way to more settled sleep, you move into what researchers call stage 2, or N2 sleep. This stage makes up a surprisingly large portion of the night, somewhere close to half of all your total sleep time, and it is here that some of the brain's most elegant protective mechanisms begin to reveal themselves. One of the central features of this stage is a large, distinctive brainwave called the K complex. It appears as a single, sharp, high-amplitude signal, one of the largest waveforms recorded anywhere in sleep science, and it can occur on its own or in direct response to something happening in the environment around you. A door closing somewhere in the house, a car passing outside, a sound in another room. What is remarkable is not simply that the K complex occurs, but what it seems to represent: a rapid, almost instantaneous evaluation of whether whatever just happened deserves your attention. Researchers have shown this with a clever piece of experimental design. Sleeping volunteers were played recordings of their own name, spoken by a familiar voice or an unfamiliar one, alongside unfamiliar names spoken the same way. The sleeping brain responded differently depending on what it heard. Unfamiliar names spoken by unfamiliar voices provoked more K complexes and more brief awakenings, tiny arousals lasting only moments, than the sleeper's own name spoken by someone they knew well. In other words, even while fully asleep, with no conscious awareness at all, your brain is still comparing incoming sound against stored knowledge of who and what matters to you. It has to access a memory of your own name, compare it to what it just heard, and decide, all within a fraction of a second, whether this requires you to wake up. Think about what that implies. Somewhere in the unconscious architecture of your sleeping mind, a version of you is still listening, still recognizing, still filtering, running a stripped-down version of the same evaluation your waking brain performs constantly. Is this relevant? Is this dangerous? Does this deserve my attention? Most of the time, for most ordinary household sounds, the answer that comes back is no. And when the answer is no, the K complex appears to do something almost protective. It seems to help suppress the arousal response that might otherwise pull you out of sleep, functioning almost like a signal telling the rest of the brain to stand down, that whatever just happened has been assessed and dismissed, and sleep can continue undisturbed. Working alongside the K complex is another hallmark of this stage, the sleep spindle. Spindles are short, fast bursts of brainwave activity, oscillating in a narrow frequency band that typically last less than 2 seconds but appear repeatedly throughout the night, generated by a small structure deep in the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus itself deserves particular attention here because it functions as something like a gatekeeper for the senses. During wakefulness, it relays an almost constant stream of sensory information, sound, touch, and more, up to the cortex for processing. During sleep, especially in these lighter stages, it begins filtering that stream far more heavily, allowing only the sounds and sensations it judges important enough to pass through and disturb you. Sleep spindles appear to be closely tied to this filtering function. Research has repeatedly shown that spindles can dampen the transmission of auditory information to the cortex, effectively insulating the sleeping brain from the ordinary background noise of the world around it. People who naturally produce more spindles during a given night tend to be more resistant to being woken by outside sound, an experimental finding that has been replicated across a number of sleep laboratories. It is one reason two people can lie in the exact same room, exposed to the exact same creak of a floorboard or hum of traffic outside, and only one of them stirs. But spindles are not simply about blocking things out. They also appear to play an active role in something entirely different and, in some ways, even more remarkable: memory. Interestingly, sleep spindles have been observed clustering right on the tail end of K complexes, almost as if the brain, having just finished assessing and dismissing an external sound, immediately pivots to using that same burst of neural activity to help stabilize a memory. It is an elegant piece of multitasking, protecting your rest and consolidating your experiences within the very same wave of electrical activity. There is a quiet kind of reassurance in all of this. If you have ever worried that a light sleeper, someone who wakes at the smallest sound, has something wrong with their brain, the truth is closer to the opposite. Their sleeping mind is simply making a different set of judgments, tuning its threshold of what counts as worth waking up for. And if you are the kind of person who sleeps through storms and slammed doors alike, that is not carelessness either. It is simply a nervous system that has, at least for tonight, decided the world outside can wait. By the time you have spent enough time cycling through these lighter stages, the brain begins a further descent, moving toward something slower, heavier, and in many ways far more restorative. The chatter of individual neurons, each firing somewhat independently as they do during wakefulness and light sleep, starts to give way to something far more synchronized. Enormous populations of brain cells beginning to rise and fall together in slow, rolling waves. This is the doorway into deep sleep, and it is where some of the most physically demanding, most biologically essential work of the entire night takes place. This deepest stage of non-dreaming sleep is often called slow-wave sleep, and the name is a fairly literal description of what is happening on the recordings. The individual brain waves measured during this stage are large, slow, and rolling, oscillating at less than 1 cycle per second in their purest form, a dramatic contrast to the faster, busier patterns of wakefulness. These slow oscillations reflect something happening at the level of enormous populations of neurons across the cortex, shifting together between what researchers call up states, brief windows where cells become active and fire, and down states, moments of near total silence. This rhythmic alternation between activity and quiet repeats over and over, wave after wave, for as long as slow-wave sleep continues. It is during this stage that the body performs some of its most significant physical restoration. Growth hormone, which supports tissue repair and the maintenance of muscle, bone, and other tissues throughout life, is released from the pituitary gland primarily during the earliest hours of the night, timed closely to your first major period of slow-wave sleep. This release happens largely regardless of what time of day you actually go to sleep, suggesting that it is deep sleep itself, and not simply the hour on the clock, that triggers this surge. It is one of the clearest examples of how the sleeping brain and the sleeping body are working in tight coordination, the electrical rhythm of the cortex above somehow linked to a hormonal release that helps rebuild and maintain the tissues below. And then there is the matter of cleaning. In recent years, researchers have identified what has come to be called the glymphatic system, a network through which cerebrospinal fluid, the clear liquid surrounding the brain, moves in through small channels alongside blood vessels, mixes with the fluid between brain cells, and carries away waste products that accumulate during a busy day of thinking. Among the substances this system appears to help clear are amyloid beta and tau, proteins that, when they accumulate in excess over long periods of time, have been closely linked to conditions like Alzheimer's disease. In a striking early study conducted in mice, researchers found that this cleaning process appeared to run far more actively during sleep than during wakefulness, with far more of these particular waste proteins cleared from the sleeping brain. Even more surprising, the same researchers observed that brain cells appeared to physically shrink during sleep by as much as 60% in the tightly packed spaces between them, opening up more room for cerebrospinal fluid to flow through and flush the tissue clean, almost like a house, making a little more space in every room before letting the cleaning crew through. One researcher offered a simple way to think about it. The brain has a limited amount of energy to spend, and it may effectively have to choose between two states: being fully awake and aware, or being asleep and using that same energy to clean itself out, much like you cannot fully entertain house guests and deep clean your kitchen at the exact same moment. It's worth pausing here to be honest about something, because good science does not pretend to have every question fully settled, and this is very much still an active area of research. While many studies, particularly in animals, have found this dramatic increase in glymphatic clearance during sleep, at least one more recent study has challenged the picture, finding that under its particular experimental conditions, waste clearance in mice actually appeared somewhat more efficient during wakefulness than during sleep or anesthesia. The scientists behind the original glymphatic research have pushed back strongly on those newer findings, and the debate is ongoing, a reminder that even well-established areas of neuroscience continue to be tested, questioned, and refined. What does seem consistently true across many separate lines of research is that a functioning glymphatic system depends on healthy sleep, that this cleaning process is most active during the deepest stages of the night, and that people who experience chronically poor or insufficient sleep tend to show reduced efficiency in clearing these waste proteins over time. Whatever the precise mechanics eventually turn out to be, the broader message from decades of sleep research remains remarkably consistent. The hours of deep sleep you get now are quietly linked to how well your brain functions decades from now. More recent work, looking specifically at how the fluid movement itself is driven, has revealed something almost musical about the process. In sleeping mice, researchers observed that the brain releases small waves of a chemical called norepinephrine roughly every 50 seconds throughout the night, and each wave appears to cause tiny blood vessels in the brain to briefly narrow. This rhythmic narrowing and widening seems to create a kind of pumping action, a slow, steady pulse that helps drive the movement of fluid through the brain's tissue. Researchers have described this whole system as functioning somewhat like a dishwasher that quietly runs its full cycle while you sleep, and this newly discovered oscillation may be one of the mechanical drivers making that cycle possible. If this kind of quiet, careful science is the sort of thing that helps you relax into sleep, you are welcome to simply let the video continue playing. There is nothing further you need to do, nothing to remember, no need to follow along closely. You can let your body rest and let the next thought, whatever it turns out to be, arrive slowly or not arrive at all. Meanwhile, deep in this slow, rolling wave activity, something else entirely is unfolding, something that touches nearly everything you learned, felt, and experienced during the day that has just ended. Because it is here, largely within these same slow oscillations, that your brain begins the delicate, physically real work of deciding what today is worth remembering. To understand how memory works during sleep, it helps to first understand a small, curved structure buried deep in each side of the brain, called the hippocampus. Throughout your waking day, as you meet people, learn facts, have conversations, and move through new places, the hippocampus acts something like a temporary holding area, rapidly encoding the details of these experiences before they have had any chance to be woven into your more permanent, long-term storage. It is fast, flexible, and good at capturing detail quickly, but it is not built to hold everything forever. That longer-term storage job belongs to the neocortex, the large, folded outer layer of the brain, responsible for much of what we think of as complex thought. And the neocortex tends to learn more slowly, gradually building stable, distributed representations of knowledge over time. The leading explanation for how information moves from that fast, temporary hippocampal storage into slower, more permanent cortical storage is known as active systems consolidation, and it places slow-wave sleep at the very center of the process. According to this model, while you sleep deeply, the hippocampus does something remarkable. It replays fragments of the day's experiences, reactivating the same patterns of neural firing that occurred when those experiences first happened, but now compressed and repeated, essentially rehearsing them for the neocortex to absorb. This replay does not happen in isolation. It appears to be tightly coordinated with the same slow oscillations described earlier, the large, rolling up and down waves of activity moving across the cortex. Researchers have identified a remarkably precise choreography among 3 distinct types of brain activity, happening almost simultaneously. The neocortical slow oscillation itself, providing a kind of rhythmic timing signal, fast bursts of thalamic activity called sleep spindles, the very same spindles described in the previous stage of sleep, and brief, extremely rapid bursts of activity in the hippocampus called sharp wave ripples, which are thought to carry the actual content of the memory being replayed. When these 3 events line up correctly, nested together within a fraction of a second of one another, the resulting synchronized activity appears to physically strengthen the connections between neurons in the neocortex, gradually building a more stable, less hippocampus-dependent version of that memory. Scientists have tested this model directly and in striking ways. In several experiments, researchers have used mild electrical stimulation, precisely timed to coincide with a person's own natural slow oscillations during sleep, in an effort to enhance this triple coupling of slow waves, spindles, and ripples. Some of this closed-loop stimulation work has shown measurable improvements in next-day memory performance, offering some of the most direct evidence yet that this specific pattern of coordinated brain activity is not simply a correlate of memory consolidation, but may genuinely be a driving mechanism behind it. Other researchers have gone even further, precisely synchronizing stimulation to the natural rhythms occurring deep in the temporal lobe, and found that doing so could boost the strength of sleep spindles and improve the overnight retention of newly learned information, a small but genuinely exciting demonstration that the brain's own natural rhythms, when nudged gently and at exactly the right moment, can meaningfully shift how well a memory survives the night. It's worth noting that this picture, elegant as it is not entirely without its complications. Some researchers studying this triple coupling have pointed out that our current models of exactly how memories move between the hippocampus and the neocortex remain incomplete in places, and in some cases even in tension with one another, particularly around exactly how much of a role the hippocampus continues to play once a memory has aged. Sleep science, like all good science, continues to refine itself as new data comes in, and the version of the story being told here is the current, well-supported understanding, not a final, unchangeable truth carved in stone. What is fairly well established is this: not every experience from your day is treated equally during this process. There is growing evidence that emotionally significant or personally important experiences are more likely to be selectively replayed and strengthened during sleep, compared to more mundane, forgettable details. This selective strengthening may be one of the quiet reasons that the meaningful moments of a day, the difficult conversation, the small triumph, the unexpected kindness, tend to stay with you far longer than what you had for lunch 3 days ago. Your sleeping brain, in a sense, is making a series of small editorial decisions on your behalf, choosing what deserves to become a permanent part of who you are, while gently letting the rest fade. There is also evidence that sleep supports more than just declarative memory, the kind involving facts and events you could consciously describe. Procedural memory, the physical, practiced kind of knowledge involved in playing an instrument, typing quickly, or performing a new movement smoothly, also appears to benefit from slow-wave sleep, along with more complex forms of thinking. Some research suggests that sleep can even help reorganize the relationships between separate pieces of information you learned while awake, occasionally allowing connections or insights to emerge overnight that were not consciously apparent to you the day before. A kind of quiet, offline reasoning happening entirely without your awareness. If your mind ever feels cluttered before sleep, filled with the leftover fragments of the day, that clutter is not a sign of failure. It may be closer to the opposite. It may be the very material your brain is preparing to sort through, replay, and, piece by piece, carefully put away. As the night continues, the brain does not simply stay in deep, slow-wave sleep until morning. Instead, it cycles, moving from lighter sleep down into deep sleep and back up again in loops that each last roughly 90 minutes, repeating 4 or 5 times across a full night. And toward the end of each of these loops, something dramatic happens. The slow, rolling waves of deep sleep suddenly give way to a completely different pattern of brain activity. Faster, busier, and in some ways strikingly similar to what your brain looks like while fully awake. This is REM sleep, named for the rapid eye movements that occur behind closed eyelids during this stage. And it is here that the most vivid dreaming of the night typically takes place. The contrast between REM sleep and the deep sleep that came before it could hardly be greater. Where slow-wave sleep is defined by enormous, synchronized slow oscillations, REM sleep produces faster, smaller, more irregular brain waves, particularly in a frequency range called theta, and the overall pattern more closely resembles wakefulness than it does the deep sleep stages surrounding it. This is part of why REM sleep earned the nickname paradoxical sleep in some of the earliest sleep research. A brain that looks almost awake, housed inside a body that is, for the most part, completely still. That stillness is not accidental. During REM sleep, the brainstem actively suppresses activity in the muscles throughout most of the body, a state called REM atonia, effectively paralyzing you from the neck down while your brain runs through its most vivid dreams. This appears to be a protective mechanism, preventing you from physically acting out the events of a dream while your body should be resting. In rare cases where this mechanism fails to engage properly, people can indeed begin acting out their dreams physically, a recognized sleep disorder that underscores just how important this normally invisible safeguard really is. The neurochemistry of the sleeping brain shifts dramatically as REM sleep begins. A chemical called acetylcholine, associated with alertness and active cortical processing, rises to levels approaching or even exceeding what is seen during wakefulness. At the same time, norepinephrine, a chemical closely tied to stress, vigilance, and the encoding of new memories, drops to its lowest point across the entire 24-hour cycle. This particular combination, a highly active, alert-seeming cortex, paired with an almost complete absence of the brain's usual stress and memory-encoding chemical, turns out to be central to understanding several of the strangest features of dreaming itself. Consider first why dreams so often feel completely real while they are happening, however strange or impossible their content might be. Brain imaging studies conducted during REM sleep have consistently found something remarkable. While certain areas at the very front of the brain go quiet, large portions of the visual cortex, the emotional centers deep in the brain such as the amygdala, and memory-related regions like the hippocampus become highly active, in some cases even more active than during ordinary wakefulness. Your visual system is essentially generating a rich, immersive sensory experience internally, without any actual light entering your eyes, and your emotional centers are fully engaged with whatever is happening in that experience. From the inside, with your visual and emotional systems both fully switched on, there is very little to distinguish a dream from reality, because as far as much of your brain's machinery is concerned, this simply is a form of reality, generated from within. What makes dreams strange, illogical, and often impossible to follow after waking is largely explained by what is happening at the very front of the brain during this same period. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with logical reasoning, self-reflection, planning, and impulse control, becomes markedly less active during REM sleep, likely due to direct inhibition from the same rise in acetylcholine mentioned earlier. With this particular region quieted, the usual checks and balances that would normally flag an impossible scenario, finding yourself suddenly in your childhood home, having a conversation with someone who has been gone for years, walking through a hallway that stretches on far longer than any real hallway could, simply are not running in the background the way they would if you were awake. Nothing inside the dream feels wrong, because the part of the brain responsible for noticing when things are wrong has, for the moment, gone quiet. There is a broader network involved here too, called the default mode network, a set of interconnected brain regions that becomes especially active during quiet daydreaming, mind-wandering, and inward reflection while you are awake. This same network appears to become deeply engaged during REM sleep as well, and some researchers describe dreaming as something like an intensified, more immersive version of ordinary daydreaming, one that has been given a fully activated sensory stage to play out upon, complete with vivid imagery, emotional weight, and a convincing, if often bizarre, internal logic all its own. And underneath all of this, the sheer amount of energy your brain spends while dreaming may surprise you. Despite your body lying almost entirely motionless, your brain during REM sleep consumes roughly as much glucose and oxygen as it does while you are fully awake and working through a genuinely difficult problem. Whatever dreaming is for, it is clearly not a passive or low-effort process. It is one of the most metabolically demanding things your brain does all day and all night, quietly, behind closed eyes, while the rest of you appears to be doing absolutely nothing at all. Given how vivid and emotionally intense dreams can feel while they are happening, it is a strange thing that most of them vanish almost completely within minutes of waking, often before you have even had time to fully open your eyes. This forgetting is not a flaw in the system. It appears to be a direct and fairly predictable consequence of the same neurochemical shift that makes dreaming possible in the first place. Recall that norepinephrine, the chemical closely involved in helping the brain encode new long-term memories, drops to its lowest level of the entire day during REM sleep. This creates something of a paradox. The very same neurochemical environment that allows a dream to feel so immersive and real also happens to be remarkably poor at recording that experience into lasting memory. Some researchers have compared it to living through a vivid experience while the part of your brain responsible for writing it down into permanent storage has effectively been switched off. The experience happens in full sensory and emotional detail, but very little of it gets properly filed away. There is a similarly important role played by that same prefrontal cortex we discussed a moment ago. Beyond its role in logical thought, this region is also closely tied to working memory, the kind of short-term mental holding space that allows you to keep a thought in mind for the next few seconds while you decide what to do with it. Because this region is significantly less active during REM sleep, dreams may simply lack the normal scaffolding needed to hold their own content in mind, even long enough to transfer it toward longer-term storage, meaning much of a dream's content may begin dissolving even before you wake up, regardless of how vivid it felt in the moment. Timing also appears to matter enormously for whether a dream is remembered at all. Research comparing people who reliably remember their dreams with people who almost never do has found a telling difference. Frequent dream recallers tend to wake up more often during the night, and these brief nighttime awakenings tend to last slightly longer, an average of around 2 minutes, compared to roughly 1 minute in people who rarely recall dreams. It seems that waking directly out of REM sleep, or very shortly afterward, offers a brief window in which the necessary neurochemicals for memory encoding have a chance to rise again before the dream content disappears entirely. Wait even a minute or two longer, and that window may close, taking the dream with it. This is also, incidentally, why the classic advice about dream journals holds real scientific weight. Writing a dream down immediately upon waking, before moving, before checking a phone, before starting the day, takes advantage of that brief chemical window before it closes for good. There is something oddly comforting in understanding this. If you rarely remember your dreams, or if the ones you do remember dissolve into fragments within moments, this does not mean you are dreaming any less than anyone else. Some research going back decades has consistently found that even people who report almost never recalling a single dream across many years, when woken carefully at the right moment in a sleep laboratory, will report a vivid dream in progress just as often as anyone else. The dreaming itself is universal. What differs from person to person is simply how much of that experience manages to survive the crossing back into waking memory. Beyond simply storing memories and generating dreams, REM sleep appears to perform another function that touches something deeply personal. It seems to help regulate how you feel about the things that happen to you. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker, whose work at the University of California, Berkeley has shaped much of the modern understanding of this area, has described REM sleep as a kind of overnight therapy session, one your brain conducts on itself, without any conscious participation from you at all. The idea works like this. During waking life, emotionally charged experiences, a stressful confrontation, an embarrassing mistake, a moment of fear, are stored in memory, along with a strong emotional charge attached to them, largely through the involvement of the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, closely tied to processing fear and emotional intensity. During REM sleep, evidence suggests that the brain replays these emotionally charged memories, but does so within that same unusual neurochemical bath described earlier, one in which norepinephrine, the chemical most closely tied to the body's stress response, has dropped to its lowest point of the entire day. The theory holds that reactivating an emotional memory in this particular low-stress internal environment may allow the brain to gradually strip away some of the sharp emotional intensity originally attached to it, while still preserving the memory of what actually happened. This is not simply a theoretical idea. It has been tested directly in controlled studies. In one influential piece of research, volunteers were shown a series of emotionally provocative images and asked to rate how strongly they reacted to each one. Some volunteers were then allowed to sleep normally, including a full night of REM sleep before being shown the same images again roughly 12 hours later. Others stayed awake across a comparable stretch of time before their second viewing. The group that had slept showed a measurably reduced emotional reaction to the same images the second time around, along with reduced activity in the amygdala itself and reduced connectivity between the amygdala and other emotion processing regions. The group that stayed awake showed no such reduction. If anything, some reacted just as strongly, or even more strongly the second time. Crucially, the size of this emotional cooling effect correlated specifically with how much REM sleep, and specifically how much of a particular slow brainwave pattern called theta activity during REM each person had experienced, not simply with how much total sleep they got. A separate line of research reinforces just how specific this REM effect appears to be. In earlier work, researchers selectively deprived volunteers of REM sleep for a single night, while still allowing them plenty of the deeper, non-REM stages of sleep. The following day, these REM-deprived volunteers showed a substantial increase in amygdala reactivity to threatening images, alongside reduced engagement of the prefrontal regions that would normally help regulate that emotional response. Their emotional reactivity, in other words, closely resembled what is typically seen after a night of no sleep at all, even though they had actually slept for most of the night. It was specifically the REM sleep they missed that seemed to matter most for restoring healthy next-day emotional regulation. One model that has emerged from this body of work is sometimes called sleep to forget, sleep to remember. It suggests that sleep, through the combined action of both deep sleep and REM sleep, helps decouple a memory from its original emotional intensity. The deep, slow-wave stages of the night are thought to help consolidate the factual content of the memory itself, while REM sleep, operating in that uniquely calm neurochemical environment, works to gradually soften the emotional charge attached to it. Over enough nights, this process is theorized to allow even difficult or painful memories to be integrated into your broader understanding of your own life, remembered clearly, but without the same raw sting they carried when the experience first occurred. This is one of the reasons that disrupted REM sleep has been so consistently linked across a large body of clinical research to conditions involving difficulties with emotional regulation, including anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. When this nightly emotional processing is interrupted or impaired, night after night, difficult memories may never get the chance to have their sharp edges gently worn down the way they normally would. It is also worth being honest that not every study in this area has found identical results, and some researchers have reported instances where emotional intensity towards certain images did not noticeably decrease after a night of sleep, a reminder that individual emotional processing is complicated and almost certainly shaped by many factors beyond sleep architecture alone, including a person's baseline stress levels, prior experiences, and general mental health. Still, taken as a whole, the weight of the evidence points in a consistent direction. Something about REM sleep, specifically, seems to help take the edge off yesterday's pain, so that tomorrow can be met with a little more clarity and a little less weight. If tonight carried something difficult with it, some worry, some hurt, some unresolved feeling still sitting heavily in your chest, there is a quiet kind of comfort in knowing that your brain has a built-in process, running automatically and requiring nothing from you, whose entire purpose is to help soften that weight while you sleep. You do not have to solve anything tonight. That work, in its own way, may already be underway. There is another quiet kind of work happening during sleep, one that touches not just memory and emotion, but the way ideas connect to one another inside your mind. For centuries, people have told stories about waking up with the answer to a problem that seemed impossible the night before, a melody arriving fully formed, a solution to a stubborn puzzle simply appearing, as though it had been waiting patiently somewhere in the dark. For a long time, these stories were treated mostly as folklore. In recent decades, careful laboratory research has started to show there may be a real neurological basis behind them. One especially well-known study asked participants to work on a task called the Remote Associates Test, a kind of puzzle that requires finding a single word linking three seemingly unrelated words together, a task that depends heavily on the ability to form loose, creative associations rather than narrow, logical deduction. Participants were divided into groups. Some took a nap that included REM sleep, some napped without reaching REM sleep, and others simply rested quietly while remaining awake. Afterward, only the group that had experienced REM sleep showed a meaningful improvement in solving these particular kinds of remote, unusual associations, roughly 40% better at forming the creative link needed to solve certain problems, compared to their own performance before the nap. Notably, this creative boost was not explained by better memory for the material. All three groups remembered the underlying items about equally well. Something about REM sleep specifically appeared to enhance the brain's ability to weave separate, previously unconnected pieces of information together into something new. The proposed explanation involves that same distinctive neurochemical mixture present during REM sleep, a boost in acetylcholine paired with a marked drop in norepinephrine. Researchers have suggested this combination may prime the brain's associative networks, allowing ideas and memories that would not normally be considered together during focused, logical waking thought to activate alongside one another and form new, sometimes unexpected connections. More recent research has pushed this exploration even earlier into the sleep process, back into that brief hypnagogic window discussed near the very beginning of this journey. A study conducted by researchers affiliated with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology found that this earliest sleep onset period may represent a particularly fertile creative window in its own right. Volunteers were given a specific creative theme to think about just before drifting off, using gentle recorded prompts to nudge their earliest dream content in that direction, a technique researchers call targeted dream incubation. When volunteers were later woken during this light sleep onset stage and their dream content was checked, those whose brief dreams incorporated the suggested theme went on to show measurably improved performance on creative tasks related to that theme, compared to volunteers who had simply stayed awake and rested for the same amount of time. The researchers describe this fleeting stage, sometimes lasting only a few minutes right at the edge of sleep, as a kind of creative sweet spot, a state loose and associative enough to encourage novel thinking, while still retaining just enough coherence to be gently steered by a well-chosen suggestion beforehand. There is even more recent work exploring this question through a much bolder method, attempting to directly influence the actual content of REM dreams themselves. In one study, researchers worked with experienced lucid dreamers, people with the rare and trainable ability to become aware that they are dreaming while the dream is still happening, and used subtle sensory cues to prompt these dreamers to think about specific unsolved puzzles while dreaming. Participants who successfully incorporated the suggested puzzle into their dream content went on to solve those particular puzzles significantly more often afterward than puzzles they had not dreamed about, offering some of the most direct experimental evidence yet that the content of a REM dream itself, and not simply the presence of REM sleep in general, may meaningfully contribute to solving a problem the following day. This body of research helps explain a piece of practical wisdom that has been passed down for generations, often without anyone quite knowing why it worked. If you are stuck on a difficult problem, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop consciously working on it altogether. Step away, let the thoughts settle, and allow sleep to take over. Somewhere in the sleeping brain, connections may continue forming quietly in the background, freed from the narrow, focused attention that waking thought demands, and loosened just enough by the sleeping brain's altered chemistry to stumble upon a link your waking mind, working too hard and too directly, might never have found on its own. There is something worth sitting with in that idea. Even when you feel as though nothing productive is happening, even in the depths of ordinary, unremarkable sleep, some quiet part of your mind may still be turning a problem over, gently, patiently, without any of the pressure or urgency that so often accompanies waking effort. While all of this mental and emotional work continues throughout the night, your brain is simultaneously managing an enormous amount of quiet physical housekeeping, adjusting your heartbeat, your breathing, your temperature, and a whole cascade of hormones, largely without any conscious involvement from you at all. Your heart rate and the balance of your autonomic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that regulates involuntary functions throughout the body, shift noticeably as you move through the different stages of sleep. During the deeper, non-REM stages, activity tends to shift toward what is called the parasympathetic branch of this system, generally associated with rest, digestion, and recovery, and heart rate typically slows and becomes more steady and regular. During REM sleep, the picture changes again, with activity shifting back toward the sympathetic branch, more closely associated with alertness and activation, and heart rate and breathing can become noticeably more variable and irregular, sometimes briefly speeding up or becoming uneven in ways that roughly mirror the emotional intensity of whatever is happening in the dream taking place at that exact moment. Body temperature follows its own slow, steady rhythm across the night as well. Core body temperature naturally begins to decline in the hours before sleep and continues dropping through much of the night, reaching its lowest point somewhere in the second half of the sleep period before beginning to climb again as morning approaches. This temperature decline is not incidental to sleep. It appears to be closely intertwined with it. Research measuring this relationship directly has found that promoting a slightly faster loss of body heat through gentle, carefully controlled cooling of the skin was associated with an increase in the amount of deep, slow-wave sleep a person experienced and a corresponding decrease in heart rate, along with changes in the timing of when REM sleep periods occurred across the night. There appears to be a genuine, physiologically real connection between the body cooling down and the brain settling into its deepest, most restorative stages of rest. Hormonally, the night is equally busy, governed largely by a small structure at the base of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which functions as the body's central circadian clock, keeping time even in the complete absence of any external light cue. One of the clearest hormonal patterns involves cortisol, often described simply as the body's primary stress hormone, though its role is considerably broader and more nuanced than that label suggests. Cortisol also plays a significant role in regulating blood sugar, blood pressure, and the sleep-wake cycle itself. As you fall asleep, cortisol secretion is actively suppressed, reaching some of its lowest levels of the entire day in the hours around sleep onset. It then begins rising slowly and steadily across the second half of the night, climbing toward a natural peak that occurs shortly after you wake, part of what helps generate that familiar sense of morning alertness, priming your body for the activity of the day ahead before you have even opened your eyes. Growth hormone, mentioned earlier alongside deep sleep, follows almost the exact opposite pattern, with its largest surge occurring early in the night, closely tied to your first substantial period of slow-wave sleep, rather than to any particular hour on the clock. Researchers have found that this tight coupling between growth hormone release and deep sleep holds up remarkably consistently, regardless of when during the 24-hour day the sleep actually occurs. Strong evidence that it is the sleep itself, and specifically the depth of that sleep, driving the hormonal surge, rather than the body's internal clock alone. Melatonin, released by a small gland deep in the brain called the pineal gland, follows the more familiar rhythm many people already associate with sleep, rising in the evening as darkness falls, helping signal to the rest of the body that the time for rest is approaching, and gradually tapering off again as morning light returns. Cortisol and melatonin work in something of a coordinated relationship across the 24-hour cycle, generally moving in opposite directions, with elevated cortisol during the day helping suppress the sleep-promoting effects of melatonin, and cortisol's evening decline helping to clear the way for melatonin to rise and encourage the transition into sleep. Even blood sugar regulation and the sensitivity of your cells to insulin shift measurably across the sleep-wake cycle, generally most efficient in the earlier part of the day and gradually less so as the day wears on, one of many small threads connecting a full, healthy night of sleep to your body's broader metabolic well-being the following day. None of these systems, the heart, the lungs, the temperature-regulating centers deep in the hypothalamus, the endocrine glands quietly releasing their hormones in careful, timed sequences, require your attention or your effort tonight. They simply continue their work, hour after hour, exactly as they have every single night of your life, largely indifferent to whether you are aware of them at all. Every night, most people wake up briefly, many times over, without ever remembering it happening at all. These are called microarousals, brief shifts in brain activity lasting only a few seconds, in which the underlying brainwave pattern moves quickly toward the faster, more wakeful frequencies before settling back into sleep almost immediately afterward. Far from being a sign of poor quality sleep, these tiny arousals appear to occur throughout completely normal, healthy sleep in every person, every night, and are increasingly understood by researchers not as interruptions, but as brief windows in which the sleeping brain checks in with its surroundings before continuing on. Occasionally, that same protective system that we described earlier, the one quietly evaluating outside sounds and events for their relevance and safety, decides that something genuinely does require your full attention, and a much larger, more complete awakening follows. This is the same fundamental mechanism, working at the level of individual K complexes and brief microarousals when the answer is no, this is not important, escalating into full wakefulness when the answer instead comes back as yes, this matters. Wake up now. It is worth appreciating just how sophisticated this constant, silent evaluation really is. A part of your brain every single night, without training, without conscious effort, and without ever fully waking up in the process, is running a continuous background risk assessment on the world around you, protecting your rest from anything unimportant while remaining ready in an instant to hand control back to full waking awareness the moment it is genuinely needed. Waking up fully in the morning is, in its own way, simply hypnagogia running in reverse, a state researchers sometimes call hypnopompic rather than hypnagogic, though the underlying territory is similar, a brief, blurred crossing between one state of consciousness and another, where dream logic and waking logic can still be tangled together for a few disorienting moments before fully separating. This is often why a vivid dream can feel entirely real and urgent for the first few seconds after waking, before gradually, sometimes frustratingly, dissolving as full wakefulness takes hold and that crucial norepinephrine-driven memory encoding window described earlier begins to close. There is a common experience many people share in which a difficult problem, worry, or emotional weight that felt overwhelming the night before somehow feels different, sometimes lighter, sometimes simply clearer, by the time morning arrives. Based on everything explored across this entire night's journey, that shift is unlikely to be a coincidence or simple wishful thinking. Between the amygdala's reduced reactivity following a night rich in REM sleep, the gradual decoupling of a memory's emotional intensity from its underlying content, the quiet reorganization and consolidation of the day's experiences within the neocortex, and the natural morning rise of cortisol helping restore a sense of clear-headed alertness, there is a substantial, well-documented body of neuroscience suggesting that your brain does not simply pause overnight and pick back up exactly where it left off. It actively works on what you are carrying, and by morning, you may genuinely be facing it with a brain that has, quite literally, been reshaped by the hours in between. This does not mean every difficult feeling resolves itself by sunrise, and it certainly does not mean sleep is some kind of guaranteed cure for every hardship a day can bring. But it does mean that the old, familiar advice to sleep on it carries real, measurable weight behind it, built not from folk wisdom alone, but from amygdala scans, hormone measurements, and carefully designed sleep laboratory studies conducted over decades. It helps, at this point, to step back and look at the overall shape of a night's sleep, because everything described so far, the light drifting of hypnagogia, the sound filtering of stage 2, the deep restorative slowness of stage 3, and the vivid dreaming intensity of REM does not happen just once. It repeats in a series of loops across the entire night, and the balance between these stages shifts noticeably as the hours pass. Each full loop through these stages, from light sleep down into deep sleep and back up through REM, is often called a sleep cycle, and a typical cycle lasts somewhere in the neighborhood of 90 minutes, though the very first cycle of the night tends to run a bit shorter, sometimes closer to 70 or 80 minutes, before later cycles stretch out toward the longer end of that range. Across a full night, most adults move through somewhere between 4 and 6 of these cycles. What is especially interesting is that these cycles are not simply identical repeats of one another. The very first cycle of the night tends to be dominated by long stretches of deep, slow-wave sleep, with only a brief REM period, sometimes lasting less than 10 minutes, tacked onto the end. As the night progresses, this balance gradually shifts. Deep, slow-wave sleep becomes shorter with each successive cycle, and, by the final cycles of the night, may barely appear at all. REM sleep, by contrast, does the opposite, lengthening with each cycle, so that the REM periods occurring in the last couple of hours before a natural morning waking can stretch to 30, 40, even 60 minutes at a time, far longer and more vivid than the brief REM period that opened the night. This shifting balance is not accidental, and it maps neatly onto everything already described about what each stage of sleep is doing. The heavy dose of deep, slow-wave sleep, concentrated in the first third of the night, lines up closely with the timing of that major growth hormone surge and much of the night's most active glymphatic cleaning and physical restoration. The heavier concentration of REM sleep in the final third of the night, meanwhile, lines up with the emotional processing, dream-based creative work, and memory integration described in the sections that followed. In a sense, a full night of sleep is structured almost like its own quiet narrative arc, opening with restoration and repair, moving through memory consolidation, and closing with emotional processing and vivid associative dreaming, each phase building the conditions for the one that follows. This architecture also helps explain why cutting a night of sleep short at either end carries a real, uneven cost. Going to bed several hours later than usual, but still waking at your normal time, tends to disproportionately rob you of that early, deep sleep-heavy portion of the night, cutting into the very stages responsible for physical repair. Waking up several hours earlier than your body is used to, by contrast, tends to cut most heavily into the REM-rich final stretch of the night, the very stretch most closely tied to emotional processing and creative associative thinking. Neither loss is simply a smaller version of a full night's sleep. Each represents the loss of a genuinely different kind of biological work. Even while your body lies motionless, your subconscious mind stays remarkably active throughout the night, and one of the clearest windows into that activity is the surprising relationship between what happens to you during the day and what shows up later in your dreams. Researchers call this the continuity hypothesis of dreaming, the idea that dream content, however strange or distorted it may appear on the surface, is very rarely random, and instead tends to reflect the concerns, preoccupations, and experiences of your waking life. One particularly well-documented pattern involves timing. Elements from your most recent day or two often reappear in dreams almost immediately, a pattern researchers call the day residue effect, a term that traces back to some of the earliest psychological writing on dreams. But there is a second, more surprising pattern layered on top of it. Memories and experiences from 5 to 7 days earlier also show a heightened tendency to reappear in dreams, even though the days in between show comparatively little incorporation, creating an unusual gap in the timeline rather than a steady decline. Researchers refer to this second wave as the dream lag effect, and while its precise mechanism is still being investigated, one leading idea connects it to the same slower memory consolidation processes described earlier in this journey, as if certain experiences are being revisited by the sleeping brain roughly a week after they occurred, perhaps during a later stage of their integration into longer-term memory. Careful studies comparing daily journals against dream reports have also found that this incorporation is rarely a literal, word-for-word replay of what actually happened. Dreams tend to borrow fragments, a place, a face, a feeling, a specific detail, and weave them into entirely new, often unrecognizable scenarios. Interestingly, some of this research has found that when a genuinely difficult or emotionally intense experience from waking life does appear in a dream, the emotional tone attached to it inside the dream is often somewhat softer, more neutral, than the emotional intensity of the original experience, a finding that lines up closely with everything described earlier about REM sleep's role in gently processing and reprocessing emotional memory. What all of this suggests is that your subconscious mind is not idle during sleep, drifting through disconnected, meaningless imagery. It appears to be continuing a kind of quiet internal conversation with your waking life, circling back to what matters to you, sometimes almost immediately, and sometimes with a curious week-long delay, weaving fragments of your days into an ongoing, evolving internal narrative that you are rarely aware of and almost never fully remember. This same subconscious processing appears to extend into how the sleeping brain handles fear, learning, and even the small decisions you will face the next day. Sleep, and REM sleep in particular, has been closely linked in research to something called fear extinction, the gradual weakening of a learned fearful response once the danger that originally caused it is no longer present. The same emotional circuitry involved in dampening the intensity of ordinary emotional memories, the amygdala working in coordination with the prefrontal cortex, appears to be central here as well, helping the sleeping brain recalibrate which threats still deserve caution and which no longer do. And because sleep has such a well-documented role in consolidating memory and reorganizing information gathered during the day, the quality of decisions made the following morning, decisions that depend on clear thinking, weighing options, and drawing on properly consolidated knowledge, are themselves shaped by the quality of the sleep that preceded them. One more thread connecting the invisible work of the night to the visible choices of the day that follows. The brain's overnight work extends its protective reach even into your immune system. coordinating a kind of quiet, defensive maintenance that unfolds largely in the early hours of the night. Certain immune cells, including a category called naive T cells, cells that have not yet encountered a specific pathogen but stand ready to respond if they do, tend to rise in number during early nocturnal sleep, while other, more immediately reactive immune cells follow a roughly opposite daily rhythm, becoming more prominent during daytime wakefulness. Researchers studying this relationship have proposed that sleep helps direct certain immune cells toward the lymph nodes, small structures scattered throughout the body where immune cells are especially well positioned to encounter and learn to recognize foreign invaders, a process fairly directly analogous to a classroom, giving the immune system a quiet, undisturbed setting in which to review and refine its defenses. This is not simply a theoretical model. Researchers have tested it directly in the context of vaccination, one of the clearest real-world tests of immune learning available. In more than one study, volunteers who slept normally the night following a vaccination went on to develop a substantially stronger antibody response weeks later, in some cases roughly double the antibody levels, compared to volunteers who were kept awake through that same first night. The effect has been observed across several different vaccines, and it appears to take hold quite early, with measurable differences in immune cell activity showing up within the first day after the vaccination itself. It seems that the immune system, much like the memory system explored earlier in this journey, relies on that first undisturbed night of sleep to properly consolidate what it has just encountered, turning a fresh exposure into a more lasting, more capable form of protection. This same overnight coordination appears to run in the opposite direction as well. Chronic sleep deprivation has been linked across a substantial body of research to elevated inflammation and reduced immune efficiency over time, and even short-term sleep restriction. Just a handful of nights of significantly shortened sleep has been shown to alter markers of immune and inflammatory activity measurably. None of this needs to feel like a warning tonight. If anything, it is one more quiet reassurance about what your body is doing for you simply by allowing you to rest. Somewhere beneath the surface of an unremarkable, ordinary night of sleep, your immune system is being recalibrated, your defenses reviewed, your body's capacity to recognize and respond to future threats gently reinforced, all without requiring a single conscious decision from you. There is one more variation on dreaming worth pausing on, a state that sits at an unusual crossing point between the vivid, illogical world of ordinary REM sleep and the reflective, self-aware quality of full wakefulness. It is called lucid dreaming, the experience of realizing, while still fully inside a dream, that you are in fact dreaming, and in some cases, even gaining a degree of conscious influence over what happens next. Recall that ordinary dreaming is closely associated with reduced activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the very region responsible for the kind of self-reflective awareness that would normally notice something is amiss. Researchers investigating lucid dreaming have found that this particular pattern shifts somewhat during a lucid episode. Brain imaging and electrical recordings taken during confirmed lucid dreams, identified in sleep laboratories using prearranged eye movement signals that lucid dreamers can deliberately perform while still asleep, have shown increased activity over frontal regions of the brain compared to ordinary, non-lucid REM sleep. Some researchers have gone further, using mild electrical stimulation aimed at these same frontal regions during REM sleep in an effort to help induce or strengthen lucid awareness, an active and still developing area of research. The general picture that emerges is one in which lucid dreaming appears to represent a kind of partial re-engagement of waking, reflective brain activity, layered on top of the otherwise typical dreaming state, rather than a completely separate phenomenon from ordinary dreaming. It is worth remembering, too, that no two sleeping brains and no two nights of sleep are perfectly identical. The proportions of deep sleep and REM sleep described throughout this journey shift meaningfully across a person's lifetime. Slow-wave sleep is generally most abundant in childhood and younger adulthood, and tends to decline fairly significantly with age, sometimes dropping from around a quarter of total sleep time in a young adult to only a small fraction of that in later life. REM sleep also tends to decline somewhat with age, though generally less steeply, while lighter stages of sleep tend to make up a correspondingly larger share of the night. This helps explain why sleep can genuinely feel different, lighter, more easily interrupted, less deeply restorative, as people move through different decades of life, and why sleep needs and patterns that work well for a teenager may look quite different from what serves someone several decades older. None of this represents sleep going wrong. It largely reflects a normally aging brain, still doing the very same essential nightly work described throughout this entire journey, simply with a shifting balance between its different stages. It is worth zooming out just for a moment to appreciate how strange sleep is when viewed from a wider evolutionary perspective. From a purely survival-focused point of view, sleep looks almost like a design flaw. An animal that sleeps is, for a significant stretch of every single day, unconscious, immobile, and largely unaware of approaching danger. It cannot forage, cannot watch for predators, cannot protect its young in the same alert way it could while awake. And yet sleep, or something functionally very similar to it, appears throughout the animal kingdom, from mammals and birds down to insects and even some simpler organisms, suggesting that whatever benefit it provides must be substantial enough to consistently outweigh this very real cost of vulnerability across an enormous range of species and evolutionary histories. Researchers have proposed a number of explanations for why this trade-off might make evolutionary sense, and most agree that no single theory fully captures the whole picture. One long-standing idea suggests that sleep evolved partly as a form of adaptive inactivity, a way of keeping an animal still and quiet during the particular hours when it would be least effective at finding food or most exposed to predators anyway, converting an unavoidable period of reduced usefulness into an opportunity for rest rather than wasted, risky activity. Other researchers have pointed to the substantial reduction in metabolic rate and energy expenditure that occurs during sleep, suggesting that conserving energy during predictable low-opportunity hours may itself provide enough of an evolutionary advantage to justify the risk. Comparative studies across species have even found a connection between how much an animal sleeps and the strength of its immune defenses, adding further weight to the idea discussed earlier in this journey that sleep and immune protection are deeply, anciently intertwined. None of these explanations fully resolves the puzzle on its own, and sleep researchers are admirably candid about this. As one evolutionary biologist put it, the very fact that sleep persists despite its obvious cost suggests its underlying benefit must be so fundamental, so deeply woven into how a nervous system functions, that evolution has simply never found a safer alternative. Every theory explored throughout this journey tonight, the physical repair, the glymphatic cleaning, the memory consolidation, the emotional processing, the immune calibration, may represent different pieces of that same larger, still not entirely understood picture, each one a genuine function of sleep, and none by itself a complete explanation for why every sleeping creature on this planet, humans very much included, continues to close its eyes and surrender itself to unconsciousness, night after night, generation after generation, despite the risk that surrender has always carried. Breathing is so automatic while you are awake that it rarely crosses your mind at all, and the same remains true while you sleep, though the underlying control system shifts in interesting ways from one sleep stage to another. During ordinary non-REM sleep, breathing is governed almost entirely by a network of neurons in the brainstem, an ancient part of the brain that also handles heart rate and other essential background functions, operating largely in response to chemical signals rather than any voluntary effort. Small structures called chemoreceptors, some tucked near large blood vessels in the neck and chest, others located directly within the brainstem itself, continuously monitor the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide circulating in your blood, adjusting the rate and depth of each breath moment by moment to keep those levels within a narrow, healthy range, entirely without your awareness. There is a rare and instructive medical condition that reveals just how much this overnight breathing depends on brainstem regulation rather than conscious control. In a disorder sometimes referred to informally by the evocative old name of Ondine's curse, damage or dysfunction affecting this particular brainstem circuitry leaves a person able to breathe entirely normally while fully awake, relying on higher, more voluntary regions of the brain to consciously maintain the rhythm, but unable to sustain adequate breathing once they fall asleep, when that voluntary, waking effort switches off and the automatic system that should take over is no longer functioning correctly. It is a striking illustration of how much invisible, automatic labor the brainstem quietly performs every single night in a healthy sleeper. Labor so seamless and so reliable that its absence in these rare cases becomes a matter of real medical urgency. Breathing itself does not stay perfectly uniform across the whole night either. During the deeper stages of non-REM sleep, breathing tends to be slow, steady, and remarkably regular, closely tracking those chemical signals in an orderly, predictable rhythm. During REM sleep, however, that same regularity gives way to something noticeably more erratic, with breathing rate and depth shifting from moment to moment in ways that do not always line up neatly with the simple chemical logic governing non-REM breathing. Some researchers studying this phenomenon have found a striking possible explanation, working with a rare group of people who are able to become lucid within their dreams, while sleep researchers monitor them in the laboratory. and asking these lucid dreamers to deliberately imagine specific dream actions, such as holding their breath or speaking within the dream, scientists observed real, measurable changes in the sleeper's actual breathing pattern that corresponded to what was happening inside the dream itself. This raises the intriguing possibility that at least some of the irregular breathing so characteristic of REM sleep may be shaped, in part, by the vivid mental content of the dream unfolding at that very moment, the physical body responding in small and involuntary ways to a story being told entirely within the sleeping mind. Whatever the precise explanation, the practical reality remains constant and reassuring. This entire respiratory system, chemoreceptors, brainstem circuitry, the shifting balance between stages, continues operating tonight exactly as it has every night of your life, adjusting your breath to your body's needs without requiring a single conscious thought from you, quietly keeping the most basic rhythm of your survival steady while your mind wanders through everything else this night has in store. Everything explored so far has focused on what a healthy, ordinary night of sleep does for you. It is worth briefly turning that picture around, not as a source of worry, but simply to appreciate, by contrast, just how much quiet work a good night accomplishes. Researchers have studied what happens to decision-making and judgment when this nightly process is interrupted or denied, and the findings help illuminate from the opposite direction everything described up to this point. Classic laboratory work using a carefully designed card-based gambling task, one built specifically to mimic the kind of uncertain, real-world decisions people face constantly in ordinary life, found that after an extended period without sleep, volunteers began drifting noticeably toward riskier choices that a well-rested version of the very same person had reliably avoided only a day or two earlier. Brain imaging conducted alongside this research pointed to a specific region as especially sensitive to sleep loss, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, an area closely involved in weighing potential gains against potential losses and integrating that weighing into a coherent, sensible decision. Related research has extended this picture in an interesting direction, suggesting that sleep deprivation does not simply make decision-making generally worse, but appears to specifically shift the balance of how the brain evaluates rewards versus risks. In this research, a single night without sleep was associated with a measurable shift toward emphasizing potential rewards while underweighting potential losses, alongside reduced activity in a brain region called the anterior insula, an area closely tied to processing negative outcomes and bodily feelings of caution or unease. In effect, the sleep-deprived brain in these studies appeared to become somewhat more focused on what it might gain, and somewhat less attentive to what it might lose. A subtle but meaningful shift in how carefully a person weighs a choice before making it. None of this needs to feel alarming. If anything, it simply reinforces, from another angle entirely, just how much quiet, essential calibration is happening throughout tonight's sleep. Calibration to memory, calibration to emotion, and, as this research suggests, calibration to something as practical and as consequential as how carefully you will weigh your options tomorrow. The version of you that wakes up after a full, undisturbed night has, in a very real and measurable sense, been given back a steadier, more careful mind than the one that would have greeted the morning without it. There is one more discovery in sleep science worth pausing on, one that shows just how directly researchers have been able to reach into this quiet, nightly process of memory consolidation and even gently steer it. It began with a simple and rather elegant experiment. Volunteers were asked to learn the locations of various objects on a screen, and while they studied, a distinctive smell, one associated with roses, was quietly present in the room. Later, while those same volunteers slept, and specifically during their deep, slow-wave sleep, researchers reintroduced that same rose scent into the air. Volunteers who received this scent again during deep sleep went on to remember the locations of the objects significantly better than volunteers who slept without the reminder, even though nobody was aware, at the time, that anything had been done to them at all. This technique has since become known among sleep researchers as targeted memory reactivation, and it has been replicated and extended using many different kinds of cues, not only smells, but also carefully chosen sounds associated with a specific piece of learned material. In one particularly striking demonstration of how this might work outside a laboratory, researchers arranged for students to study a history lesson in their actual classroom while a specific odor was present, then had the same odor gently reintroduced into their bedrooms while they slept at home that same night. Students who received this quiet, unnoticed reminder during sleep performed measurably better when tested on the material a full week later, compared to students who studied the identical lesson but slept without any reactivation cue at all. The implication of this research is quietly remarkable. It suggests that the sleeping brain is not simply replaying memories at random, tumbling through the day's experiences in whatever order they happen to surface, but can, at least to some degree, be gently guided toward reactivating and strengthening particular memories, almost like a conductor nudging a specific instrument to come forward within an orchestra that would otherwise be playing everything at once. Researchers have found that this technique appears to work most reliably when the reactivating cue is introduced during those same slow-wave, deep sleep stages already described earlier in this journey, right alongside the natural slow oscillations, spindles, and sharp wave ripples, doing so much of the underlying consolidation work on their own. This same body of research has also uncovered a more delicate side to the story. Reactivating one memory during sleep does not always come without cost to others. In some experiments, when two related but separate pieces of information were both linked to reactivation cues presented during sleep, strengthening one appeared to come, in certain conditions, at the expense of the other, a sleeping echo of a phenomenon well documented in waking memory research, in which retrieving one memory can make a closely related memory somewhat harder to recall. Sleep, in other words, does not simply add strength evenly across everything you learned. It appears to make choices, sometimes subtle, sometimes shaped by outside cues, about which threads of memory to reinforce and which to quietly let fade. None of this is something to think about tonight in any active way. There is no scent being played into this room, no carefully engineered sound cueing a memory you studied earlier today. But it is worth appreciating, one more time, just how sensitive and how genuinely responsive your sleeping brain continues to be throughout the night, still listening in its own way, still capable of being gently influenced by the world around it, even in its deepest, most unreachable hours. It is worth briefly considering how different this entire nightly process once looked for you, long before you could have remembered any of it. A newborn baby spends roughly half of all sleep time, sometimes even more, in an early, more primitive form of REM sleep that researchers often call active sleep, a proportion far higher than the 15 to 20% typically seen in a healthy adult. In these earliest weeks of life, an infant's brain is undergoing a pace of construction it will never experience again, forming new synaptic connections at a staggering rate and roughly tripling in overall size within the first year alone. One compelling explanation for why infants spend so much of their sleep in this active, REM-like state connects directly back to that same rapid brain construction. During this stage, the brainstem generates spontaneous internal bursts of neural activity that ripple outward through the developing visual, auditory, and motor systems, providing a kind of internally generated stimulation and practice for circuits that have not yet had enough real-world experience to shape themselves. In a sense, the earliest form of dreaming sleep may function less like storytelling and more like scaffolding, an internally generated rehearsal that helps sculpt a rapidly growing brain before the outside world has had much chance to do so itself. Supporting evidence for this idea comes partly from animal research, where young rats deprived of this active sleep during their earliest development went on to show measurable reductions in brain volume and lasting alterations in brain chemistry compared to rats that were allowed to sleep normally. As a child grows, this balance shifts steadily. The proportion of REM sleep gradually declines across infancy and early childhood, falling from roughly half of total sleep time in the newborn period down toward the more familiar adult proportion by later childhood, while the distinct, mature stages of non-REM sleep, including true slow-wave deep sleep, take shape and become more clearly defined along the way. Sleep cycles themselves lengthen considerably over this same period, moving from the short 40 to 60-minute cycles typical of a newborn toward the longer, roughly 90-minute adult pattern described earlier in this journey. There is something quietly moving in tracing this arc, from a newborn brain spending half its sleeping hours immersed in vivid internal activity simply to help itself finish building its own foundations, all the way to the fully formed, carefully balanced architecture of adult sleep explored throughout this entire night's journey. The same fundamental biological tools, REM sleep, slow-wave sleep, the rising and falling of brain waves across the night, have been with you since your very first hours of life, changing in proportion and purpose as you grew, but never truly disappearing, still quietly at work tonight, in the very same brain that once used them simply to learn how to become itself. Sleep also reaches into something as basic as your sense of hunger, through the quiet overnight regulation of two hormones that constantly negotiate with each other to signal whether your body needs more energy or has enough. One of these, ghrelin, is produced mainly in the stomach and tends to rise before a meal, signaling hunger, while the other, leptin, produced by fat tissue, tends to signal fullness and satisfaction, helping to suppress the drive to keep eating. Together, they form an ongoing, largely automatic conversation between your body and your brain about energy balance, a conversation that continues in its own quiet way, even while you sleep. Careful experimental studies have found that even a single night of significantly shortened or disrupted sleep can shift this balance, typically producing a rise in ghrelin alongside a modest drop in leptin, a hormonal shift that would tend to nudge a person toward feeling hungrier and less satisfied the following day, regardless of how much they had actually eaten. Some research has also found accompanying increases in a related hormone called adiponectin following acute sleep loss, part of a broader pattern of metabolic recalibration that appears to follow disrupted sleep. It is worth being honest, though, that this area of research is more tangled than some of the other systems described throughout this journey. Larger reviews, pulling together many separate studies on this topic, have sometimes found the overall pattern to be less consistent than the individual, more tightly controlled laboratory studies suggest, likely due to real differences in how various studies have been designed, when blood samples were taken, and who was being studied. The broader, well-supported relationship between poor sleep and long-term changes in weight and metabolism appears to be real and repeatedly documented, even if the exact hormonal mechanism connecting the two is still being worked out with full precision. What this adds, gently, to everything already explored tonight is one more thread in an already rich picture. Sleep does not simply restore your brain and calm your emotions. It also quietly recalibrates something as fundamental as your body's sense of its own energy needs. Another small, invisible negotiation continuing tonight between your stomach, your fat tissue, and the deep regulatory centers of your brain, entirely independent of anything you need to think about or manage yourself. There is so much happening inside a single, ordinary night that it can be hard to hold all of it in mind at once, and there is no need to try. You do not need to remember the names of brain waves, or which chemical rises and which one falls, or which structure talks to which. All of that has been happening every single night of your life, long before you ever heard these words, and it will keep happening tonight, whether or not a single detail of it stays with you. What matters, if anything does, is simply this quiet understanding that sleep is not empty time. It never was. While your body has been lying still, growing heavier, sinking further into the mattress beneath you, your brain has been folding today into your memory, gently loosening the sharp edges of anything that hurt, filtering the sounds of the world outside so that only the truly important ones could reach you, cooling your body, slowing your heart, releasing the hormones that repair what the day wore down, and clearing away, quietly and patiently, the small residue that a busy mind leaves behind. Somewhere in the hours ahead, it may even open a door into something strange and vivid and dreamlike, a story built entirely from the material of your own life, one you may never remember having watched. None of this requires your effort. None of it requires your attention. It simply requires you to let go, a little at a time, the way you might loosen your grip on something you have been holding too tightly for too long. If your thoughts are still moving, drifting from one small unfinished thing to another, that is all right. Let them drift. You do not have to follow them, and you do not have to stop them either. They will slow on their own. The way a wheel spun by hand will slow gradually to a stop long after the hand has let go. There is nothing to solve right now. There is nowhere you need to be. There is only this moment, and the soft weight of the blanket, and the quiet dark, and the slow work of a brain that already knows exactly what to do next without being told. Somewhere close by, your breathing has probably already begun to steady, falling into that same slow, dependable rhythm it has kept every night of your life, controlled by something ancient and reliable, deep in the stem of your brain, that never once forgets how. Your heart, too, is likely beginning to settle, trading its daytime urgency for something calmer, something closer to rest. Minute by minute, your body's temperature is quietly beginning its long, slow decline, cooling by fractions of a degree, exactly the way it needs to in order to sink into the deepest, most restorative stretch of the night. None of this is something you need to help along. It happens because it always has. It happens because you are built for it. Somewhere ahead of you, in the hours that follow, waves of slow, rolling brain activity will rise and fall like something almost oceanic, washing gently across your mind, carrying old memories back toward the surface, just long enough to strengthen them before letting them settle again into someplace safer, someplace more permanent. Fluid will move quietly through the narrow spaces around your neurons, clearing away the fine debris of a long day of thinking, leaving your mind a little clearer than it was tonight. Deep inside you, hormones will rise on their own schedule, tending to small repairs you will never notice happening, mending what needs mending, the way they always do. And later, in the smaller hours before morning, something else may stir, a kind of vivid, private theater, built from fragments of your own days, arranged into shapes you have never quite seen before. You may not remember it. Most people don't. But it will still have done its quiet work, taking whatever weighed on you today and gently, gradually, softening its edges, so that when morning eventually comes, you may find that same weight has grown just a little lighter, without your ever noticing the exact moment it happened. You do not need to hold on to any of this. Let it become background now, the way a familiar sound becomes background once you have heard it enough times. Let your mind stop trying to follow the details and simply rest in the larger, simpler truth underneath all of them, that you are safe, that your body knows what to do, and that the most important parts of tonight will happen entirely without you, exactly as they are supposed to. If your eyes have grown heavy, let them close, if they have not already. If your breathing has slowed, let it slow further. There is no reason to resist any of it. There never was. Somewhere far off, thoughts may still be passing through your mind, small and quiet now, softer than they were a few minutes ago, like the last few leaves drifting down after most of the tree has already gone still. You don't have to catch them. You don't have to make sense of them. Just let them fall, one after another, further and further apart, until there is more space between them than thought. The night ahead of you is not empty. It never is. But it is also nothing you need to manage, or plan for, or think your way through. It is already underway, in the oldest, most practiced parts of you, the parts that have done this every night of your entire life, without fail, without needing your permission, without needing anything from you at all except this, the simple, generous act of letting go. So let go now, a little more. Let the room grow quieter, even if it was already quiet. Let your body feel heavier, even if it already felt heavy. Let whatever thought is passing through your mind right now be the last one you try to hold on to, and let the ones after it simply drift past, unremarkable, unimportant, easy to release. Somewhere in the dark, your brain is already beginning the long, careful work of the night, and it does not need you awake to do it well. It never has. All it needs is for you to rest, to breathe, to stop reaching for anything, and to trust, the way you have trusted every single night before this one. That morning will come, quietly, on its own, exactly when it is supposed to. Rest now. There is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to do. Let the night take care of the rest.